My name is Mert Tökmen. It's a different sounding name, probably. That's because I'm originally from Istanbul, Turkey. It's a Turkish name. I moved to the United States in 1993 to get my MBA from the University of Arkansas. And later in 1996, I got my MBA, and then you can see there's a little bit of a gap between 1996 and 2002. That's when I worked in the industry, as a marketing research analyst and also as a consultant of customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. And then in 2002, I started my doctoral program at the University of Alabama. I got my PhD in marketing and logistics. And in 2007, I moved to Virginia to start my first job as a assistant professor at James Madison University. My dissertation at the time, when I graduated with my doctoral degree, was on managing cooperative relationships. In 2007, I defended my dissertation. And so, a big part of that, dissertation was based on the theory of, trust and commitment. And so my advisor, my chair for my dissertation was Rob Morgan at the University of Alabama, who actually developed the theory of trust and commitment. So I've been studying trust for the last 20 years or so. And so I'm very happy to be here with you guys today, to share what I know about, trust and developing trust, both within the organizations and between organizations. And again, I'm very, very happy to be with you all. I know that what you are doing is very, very valuable. You're adding a lot of value to your participants and to the regions, where you live. And so I'm very, very honored to be with you guys this morning. You can also see my family, my wife, Wendy, and my son, Ezra. As you can see, Ezra is in a wheelchair. He is a special needs child, but, he loves to travel with us. And that's one of the things that we do. We love to travel as a family. This picture is from Peru. This was the last trip we took as a family right before COVID. We would love to continue our travels in the near future as well. I've only been to, Northern Africa. I've been to Egypt and Morocco, and I look forward to, traveling to Sub-Saharan Africa someday as well. It's definitely on the list, and I would love to do that someday. Our agenda today, we will start talking about trust, and I will have some questions for you guys about the importance of trust, and then we will get into the general trust model. This is a model that, as I mentioned, my doctoral chair has developed, Dr. Rob Morgan. It is the most cited theory in marketing and management, the theory of trust and commitment in relationship marketing. And we will go over that model. And then after we go over the model and understand how it works, then we're going to apply that model to different contexts. So the first context we're going to look into is, how do we develop and improve trust within the organization, say, for instance, between the team leaders and team members. And after we look at that, then we're going to apply the same model to the relationships across network of organizations. So for instance, how do we develop and improve trust between, your different organizations in South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, and Senegal. And then we're going to take the same model and we're going to now apply it to, after that, to relationships with, your partners, especially with your funding partners like USAID and MasterCard. And then finally, we're going to look at how that same model applies to, building and improving relationships with your current and past participants, and how you can cultivate those relationships, in your future endeavors. And then once we go through all those applications, we're going to have some final thoughts on building and improving trust. And hopefully you will, get some sort of, to-do list after this, on how to build and improve trust in your organizations and with partners and also with your current and past participants, with your alumni. All right, so the first thing I want to ask to you is, why is trust important in an organization and between organizations? And so if you don't mind, please open your chat boxes and put in the reasons why you think, trust is important. I love that. Trust improves efficiency within an organization. Sharing necessary information, absolutely. It's the beginning of a good relationship. It's the backbone of functions and functionality. Harry says organizations will do what is expected of them. So I think maybe all of us are in agreement that, trust is extremely important, in the operations of an organization. So, for its efficiency, for its effectiveness, for its, working together, cooperation, fostering unity. That's another really good example, Carolyn, showing, why trust is so important. If you think about, different contexts, where, we need trust, right? So for instance, we need trust between management and employees, right? So, between team members and, and the team leaders. And if the team leaders build trust with the team members, right, then you get more engagement from the employees, or you get more engagement from your team members because they feel more comfortable in sharing information, right? If they trust the leaders, right? If they trust that the leaders will pay attention to them, if they trust that the leaders will not punish them for sharing their ideas, if they trust that, the leaders genuinely care about them, right? Then they will be more open in sharing their ideas, and they're going to be engaging more. You're going to see more innovative ideas coming from your employees, and they will feel more safe, right? In terms of coming up with these great ideas. Yeah. So I see another one. You give staff confidence that someone has their back, right? So, it's then, you see that it is the backbone of, operating as a team within an organization. But also when you think about, okay, not just within the organization, but between organizations, we can develop trust, right? And so when we do develop trust between organizations, say, for instance, Yali, South Africa and Yali, Kenya, maybe we can develop more trust between those two groups. Between, Yali, Senegal and Yali, Ghana, maybe we can develop more trust between those groups. And when we do that, inter-organizational trust, then you will start, seeing more collaboration, more cooperation between the two groups, right? And more sharing of information, more sharing of ideas, more innovation is going to take place as a result of that. And then also, building trust with your partners, with your, funding partners who provide you with the funds that you need. If you build more trust with them, of course, that can lead to a more, long-term relationship, right, with your partners. And the longer term relationship you have with them, you have more maybe funding stability as a result of that, right? And so, and then, you're going to share more resources with each other, and you're going to share more knowledge with each other as well, which is going to make both parties very comfortable, as you work together, find efficiencies in some cases, maybe to cut waste down, to cut cost down. So there are numerous reasons why trust is extremely important in terms of, finding new ways to work together. And then also when you think about, building trust with your, current participants, right? The current students in your organizations and the ones that already graduated, the ones that are, your former participants, your past participants. Building trust with them is extremely important because, they are your word of mouth. And so the more they trust your organization, the more they will talk about to others, right, about your organization, and they're going to bring new participants, to your organization. So they're going to refer, you're going to have a larger network as a result of that. And then, of course, working with them as partners going forward, perhaps, some of them are going to be very, very successful in the future, and they can be your future funding partners as well. So having that, very strong relationship based on trust with them can pay, large dividends, for your organization in the future as well. So I think at this point, we established the importance of trust, and we all, are on the same page about, yes, it is extremely important that we need to understand how to develop trust within our organization and with all the different stakeholders, externally to our organization as well. So then the question is, how do we do that, right? And so, which then brings us to the general trust model. And so the first thing that we need to do as we look at the trust model is to understand what is involved in trust. How do we define trust and what's involved in trust, right? So looking at trust, we have 4 different components. The first one being the authenticity, right? Then the credibility, integrity, and empathy, okay? So authenticity refers to, to being genuine and sincere, right? So as a team leader, when you say something to your team members, right, they understand that, you are coming from a very sincere place, right? You're coming, you're very, very genuine about what you are saying. Whether as a person or as an organization, authenticity is incredibly important, right? When you talk about, so, I will give you one example, for instance. Sometimes when we go to hotels, right? We see signs in the rooms that says, we're not going to change your towels unless you throw them, on the floor. We want to be more sustainable, and we want to be more environmentally friendly. So we're not changing towels every day. So unless you throw the towels on the floor, when our housekeepers come inside the rooms, they're not going to change the towels. Now, some of us, when we see those signs, we think that, are you sincere about this? Are you really sincere about your sustainability efforts? Are you really sincere about your environmentally friendliness? Or are you just not changing the towels because you want to save costs, right? And so, we have this skepticism about, what is behind this idea of not changing the towels. Is it truly, are you authentically a sustainable company? Because when I look at some of the other things that you are doing, right, perhaps it doesn't come across as being very authentic as an organization, who wants, sustainability. But, if everything that you do is about sustainability, from changing towels to the type of shampoo that you use inside the rooms, to the type of cleaning materials that you use inside the rooms, to the way that your front desk operates, then maybe I will believe more in what you're saying as far as trying to be sustainable. But if you're only showing sustainability in terms of changing the towels, but everything else that you do is not very sustainable, then you're not very authentic. You're not very sincere about what you're saying, right? So it's very, very important, to build this authenticity, to establish genuine connections with people, right? Building this emotional connection with people, that they believe what you say, to encourage open communication. For those reasons, authenticity is a very, very big component of trust. The second component is credibility. So credibility refers to the quality of being trustworthy, right? Reliable, believable, and then you have the expertise, the competence, right? To be able to deliver what you promise, right? So trust is mostly about, keeping your promises, right? And so to be able to keep your promise, right, you have to have the competence and you have to have the expertise to be able to deliver on what you promise. So for instance, right now, I'm promising you that I'm going to, show you how to build trust, right? And in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned to you guys that I've been studying trust for the last 20 years, including my dissertation, including all of my research. That's, mainly what I've been doing as an academic. So I've been trying to establish, some sort of credibility with you that, what I'm telling you about trust is, is what I've studied, for the last 20 years, right? And so that now that you can trust me on what I'm saying about trust, right? So, credibility is very, very important in terms of establishing trust, because now you can believe that I can deliver my promise to you, right? And so that gives you confidence, right? So as a client, as a customer, as a, or as an employee, or as a partner, right? That gives you confidence that you will receive what is promised to you, right? And, and there's going to be this knowledge that you're receiving or skills that you will receive that is going to meet your expectations, right? And so you trust in that. And then the next one is integrity, right? Integrity is also a very, very important component of trust. It refers to the adherence to moral and ethical principles, right? It refers to honesty and consistency between my words and actions, right? And so when I behave with integrity, right, you're seeing honesty, you're seeing transparency in my communications. You're seeing that I take responsibility in my words. And so that leads to building stronger relationships based on integrity, based on the trust that you develop. Because when someone exhibits integrity, they are perceived as dependable, right? They fulfill their commitments, they keep their promises, and so then you trust them, in what they say and into their actions, right? So, and then the fourth component of trust is empathy. So empathy refers to the ability to understand and share the feelings, the perspectives, and the experiences of the others, right? It involves putting yourself in someone else's shoes and demonstrating compassion and understanding. And empathy plays a vital role in building trust because, through empathy, you're building this emotional connection. You're showing people that, hey, I can't put myself in your shoes and I understand what you are going through. And by doing so, I can build an emotional connection with you. I can build a rapport with you. And, and we're going to see later on that, trust is built in time, right? It takes time to build trust, and building this rapport, building this understanding could be the first stage of building trust, right? And so having this open communication with people, showing that, that you can, put themselves in their shoes and be able to understand them, provide support for them, right? As a result of that is also a big part of trust. So these four different components are the pillars of trust. And now we're going to look at, okay, so what are the different factors? If we increase those things, then we're going to be able to increase these four different components of trust. So the causes of these four different components are, those three factors. One is communication effectiveness. The other is shared values. And then the third one is avoiding opportunistic behaviors or opportunism. Okay. Communication effectiveness involves several components that contribute to its, overall transparency, right? So, we need to be very transparent in our communications. We need to be very, very clear in our communications. And we need to constantly provide feedback on what we are understanding, right? So, when we think about communication, usually what happens is that, we give a message and then that message is translated by the receiver, right? So not always what we send as a message is understood by the receiver exactly the way we wanted them to hear it, right? So, sometimes, with students, we play this phone game and, one person starts whispering something in somebody's mouth, and after, going through 5, 6 different, people, the end result, the sixth person, what they are saying is different than what the first person says. So as the same message goes through 5, 6 different people, the message changes a lot. So to prevent from that message to change, right, we need the message to be very, very simple and, very, very clear. So then that message is not going to change, from person to person as it passes through different people, if it's super simple and super clear, right? So in terms of communication effectiveness as team leaders, as organizational leaders, we have to be very clear in our message, very simple with our message, and very transparent with all the knowledge that we have. And so people have access to all the information that we have. The other part of communication also is active listening. So, when we're on the receiving end of communication, we have to be active listeners, right? So that, we're not confused about what the message is, right? And we have to show this genuine willingness to understand the exact message that the senders are sending us, this message, right? And so, and that's, the importance of communication effectiveness. And when we are great in terms of communication and how effective we are in terms of communication, then, the perceptions from the receivers are such that, oh, this communication comes across as being more authentic. There's no confusion about it, right? It's very credible because, it's very simple and it's very transparent, right? They will perceive integrity from your communications because, again, you're listening, very, very carefully and actively. They will perceive empathy, again, because you're listening and trying to understand, what the message is. And so that's why communication effectiveness is very, very important in building trust. The second factor that's increasing general trust is shared values, okay? So shared values, they refer to a common set of beliefs, principles, and ideas that are held by either individuals or groups, right? So in my previous example, for instance, I mentioned sustainability as a potential shared value for a hotel management company, right? And so and then for that company, for that shared value to develop trust, the customers of that hotel should also believe in that same value, right? So the customers should also think that sustainability is important, right? And not only that, but the communication of the hotel about sustainability has to be effective so that the customers will think that that communication is of that specific value of sustainability is authentic, it's credible, right? It's with integrity, with honesty, and it also empathizes with the sustainability needs of those customers, right? And so, for us to build trust, the values that we have has to be shared by all the parties that's involved in this relationship with which we are building trust. So when we have shared values, then there's an alignment between the parties within the relationship, right? Then we have mutual respect for each other when we have shared values. And that helps us, build more trust. There is more predictability and consistency between the, partners in a relationship, right? So, when we have shared values, which again, builds more trust. And so, that similarity within our values that we share is very, very important for us to build these 4 components of trust. And then the final factor that's going to build trust is preventing or avoiding opportunistic behaviors. Okay, so what opportunism means is that it refers to the behavior of taking advantage of specific situations, or taking advantage of others to gain benefits for ourselves, right? So it's almost the opposite of building trust. It's taking advantage of situations, taking advantage of other people just to benefit ourselves, right? Whereas trust is about cooperation and creating mutual benefits. So when you act opportunistically, then it takes away from building trust. It works negatively. So we want to avoid those opportunistic behaviors. Because in opportunistic behaviors, you're seeking self-interest at the expense of others. You're exploiting, situations, you're exploiting circumstances. And when you do that, you're basically eroding trust and causing people not to trust you. And so, it creates lack of reliability, right? When someone acts opportunistically, taking advantage of situations and other people's situations, and it creates this feeling of betrayal, right? And so that works very negatively in terms of building trust. So it's very, very important to identify opportunistic behaviors and avoiding them if we want to build trust and to build these long-term relationships with others, either as a person or as an organization. Okay. So if we do these, and if we improve our organization, ourselves, on these 3 factors, then we will have a higher likelihood of building trust with others, right? With other organizations, with other people. And if we do that, if we build more trust with others, then we will see these outcomes. We will see more commitment, right, in the relationship. We will see more strong dedication, more loyalty in the relationships, so the relationships will last longer. They're going to become more long-term relationships. And there are many, many, reasons why we say long-term relationships are good for organizations, are good for people, because, long-term relationships create more effectiveness and more efficiency in the relationship. We know each other better. We know each other's tendencies, right? And as a result, we work together better, either to develop new ideas, more innovation, more risk-taking. We can take, more risks together, more innovate together, or in terms of, cutting waste, cutting costs down. So long-term relationships, committed relationships, work always to the advantage of the organizations. The other outcome that we see as a result of trust is cooperation. So cooperation refers to the act of working together towards a common goal, right? So, you share resources more and more with each other. You share knowledge with each other. You share maybe some human resources, some workers with each other, right? And so, cooperation also includes, shared problem solving. So, you look at a problem all together and find solutions for that problem. And, you establish reliability through cooperation in working together. And then the other nice thing that I see about cooperation a lot of times is being flexible with each other, right? This is a big concern, in the US culture, for instance, where, in the US, we want to put everything, in writing, right? We want to put everything in contracts because, in cases where we don't trust each other in the US, we can always go back to the contract and say, hey, look what the contract says. And so we can just, do what the contract says. And that's not very flexible. That's usually, one side wins and the other side loses every time we go back to the contract. Cooperation is where we're flexible with each other. So we don't go back to the contract every time. Instead, we're looking for, win-win solutions, and that may not exist in the contract. But now that we're working flexibly with each other, we look for those win-win solutions, and we're doing shared problem solving through that flexibility. The next outcome is conflict resolution, right? So when we trust each other, we are also better at resolving conflicts in a way that is also flexible, that's also has we understand each other's problems, we understand each other's issues, and so that we have an open and honest communication in resolving that conflict because we trust each other, right? And so that strengthens the relationship, and then as a result we have a more resilient relationship that doesn't give up at the face of a conflict, right? And then it becomes a more, again, long-term committed relationship because we are better at resolving conflicts. And then the final outcome that we will talk about is certainty, right? As a result of building more trust, then we have less ambiguity and more certainty about the future, about the state of our confidence and assurance in the predictability of this relationship, right? So because we trust each other, we share more information with each other, we share more knowledge with each other, we communicate more effectively, then we have a more clear understanding of what the future is going to bring. We can predict the future a little bit better, right? We have more reliability and dependability in the relationship, which then allows us to take maybe bigger risks as an organization to innovate, to get better in certain aspects of the objectives of our organization. And so you see, that the trust is in the center of all relationships, right? And so if we build trust with our stakeholders, with our employees, with our team members, then we have these wonderful outcomes of longer-term committed relationships where we cooperate to gain mutual benefits. We resolve conflicts in a very win-win manner, which creates certainty for the future. And to be able to develop this trust, we need to communicate more effectively. We need to share the same types of values, and we need to avoid opportunistic behaviors. And so, now that we have this model, it's also important to understand that this model may be a little bit different in different contexts, right? So maybe in some cases, in some contexts, cooperation, to receive cooperation out of trust becomes more important. In some cases, communication effectiveness is going to play a bigger role in developing trust. In other cases, maybe shared values is going to become a more important factor to build trust, right? So, so there are different contexts, different types of relationships, different levels of relationships, And, those would be the different contexts that we're going to start looking at now, okay? So before I go into different contexts, are there any questions, any remarks at this point that you want to ask or you want to contribute? I'm also checking the text box. If you guys want to put anything in there, I can see those as well. So if there is nothing, the first context that I want to discuss with you guys is the internal relationships within your organizations, right? So, as team leaders, of your organizations, perhaps, you may be managing a very big team or a smaller team. You still have to build this trust between the team leader and the members of the team, right? And so you need to start asking these questions to yourself, does my team trust me, right? The team members, do they trust me? And so, if in some cases you feel there's a lack of trust, right? Then, you will see that your team members may resist your ideas, right? And as a result, they may not put forth their best effort, right? And so you don't see them engage as much. You don't see them, come out with a lot of ideas. And then they don't, go beyond, what's necessary to, to reach your goals. And that may be because that your team members do not fully trust you, right? The second question is, do I trust my team, right? So do I fully trust the members of my team that they are going to do their best to achieve our goals, right? And so, when that happens, when, you don't fully trust your team members, that what happens is that, you'll end up micromanaging your team. You constantly try to, interfere what they do, constantly monitor them, constantly interfere what they are doing. And as a result, the progress will stall, right? And you're not going to move to achieve your goals as effectively because you're not fully trusting your team members. And then the third question is, do the team members trust each other? It's not just the trust between the team leader and the members, but among the team members, there needs to be trust built as well. And if there is no trust between the team members, then they're not going to work together as a team, right? And so they're not going to have this, creative and efficient work together as members of the team. So, when you look at this context within the organization, there are three aspects to it then, right? So, trust between the team leader and then the team members, right? Does the members of the team trust the team leader? And as a leader, do I trust my team members? And is there trust among my team members, right? And in all three cases, there are issues with achieving the goals as a team. And so we need to understand what's happening here, right? So we need to look at maybe, exactly what's happening to be able to, how do I develop, improve trust, within my team, between me and my team members, and among my team members, what is missing? Is it the authenticity? Is it the credibility? Is it the integrity or empathy? What is missing in this context that I can improve, right? So that, we can become a better team by trusting each other more and more. And so I'm going to show you for instance, one scenario. In this scenario, your team reaches a big goal, right? But when you congratulate them as a team leader, right, and you look for input on the next phase of the project, you are met with silence from many of the team members. So looking back at the model, the general trust model, and the 4 components of trust, what do you think may be the issue here? Even though you congratulate them on achieving this big goal and you're looking for input, right, from your team members for the next phase, they're not engaging, they're not sharing ideas, they're not sharing information, right? What do you think may be the problem here? You can put your answers either in the text box, or if you feel more comfortable just unmuting yourselves, that's perfectly fine too. So Harry says, this is an authenticity problem. So perhaps, they don't feel that, you're sincere about your congratulations, right? And so when you congratulate them, you're kind of faking that. They don't truly believe in the sincerity of this, reaching the big goal and congratulating them. That may be an authenticity problem. Does everybody agree with that, or do you have other reasons why this may be the issue? Betty says it's a credibility issue, right? So perhaps, the team leader who is congratulating them, they don't believe in the expertise, of this or the credibility of this, team leader. And so the team members themselves do not believe that they are where they need to be in terms of, achieving their objectives. And so there's really nothing to congratulate yet. And so they don't really believe, the team leader, right? And so here are some potential, so inattentive or dismissive before, that's, exactly right. So, in this case, for instance, team members may be afraid that, that they will be judged, if they shared, ideas, right? And, so they are afraid of being judged. And as a result, they prefer to stay quiet, right? Or, perhaps that's because the team leader in the past, has been dismissive of, the team members' ideas, or not inattentive, did not really, closely listen to them, right, about their ideas. And, the team members never felt like they've been heard before. So it's inauthentic when the team leader asks them, what are your ideas? They know that that's not, a sincere question. And so that may be the issue. And then, it may be also the case that the team leader, may have played favorites in the past. And so only some team members got listened to and others haven't been heard before. And so they don't believe, again, in the sincerity when a team leader says, oh, I want to hear your ideas, because they've never paid attention to the team members' ideas in the past, or some team members' ideas in the past. And so, when we bring up, our model again to sort of solve this scenario, right, there is a problem with the authenticity, with the credibility of the team leader, because, when the team members hear the team leader about wanting to hear their ideas, they don't believe it. They don't believe that they're going to be heard. They're not they don't believe that they're going to be listened to, or their ideas are going to be valuable to the team leader. And they don't believe that, if they share ideas, they're in a safe place, that they're not going to be judged, right? And so, how can the team leader solve this problem in the future, right? How can the team leader, what can the team leader improve to solve this problem of authenticity and credibility in the future? And, when you look at that, we have these three factors that we need to pay attention to, right? So, we need to communicate more, we need to start communicating more effectively, right? Which means that we need to be more transparent in showing that, hey, we're actually paying attention to everybody's ideas, right? And so in our communications, by being transparent, we need to make our team members understand that, all ideas are valuable, right? We're not judging people for sharing out of the box ideas, right? We're not judging anybody, for bringing forth perhaps some, unique ideas that nobody has thought about before. We're not also, we're also listening to and valuing every single idea, and and we don't get defensive when there's some sort of a disagreement, right? And actually valuing every single idea, and this collaboration for innovation is a shared value within our organization, so that we want to hear all ideas, right? So we need to improve on these aspects to be able to improve the perceptions of authenticity and credibility among the team members, so that the trust is going to be improved. And if the team members in the future trust us more, then they are going to cooperate more and engage more with their ideas, right? And so, that's one example in this context of, internal trust development. I will share with you another scenario. In this case, in this scenario, the team had been working together for several months, steadily progressing towards their project goals. However, lately, team members began to feel increasingly frustrated and demotivated. They sensed that their team leaders started to closely monitor every task, frequently checking in on team members' progress, and even dictating specific steps to be taken and the exact methods to follow, leaving very little room for individual decision-making and creativity. What are we describing here in this scenario? Exactly, micromanagement, right? So, and then the micromanagement is happening because the team leader is not trusting the team members, right? And so the team members are feeling like they are being micromanaged, and they're not trusted, right? And so, we need, as a team member, as a team leader, we need to recognize that, right? We need to recognize when we are, going too far with, micromanaging our employees, and that is causing frustration and demotivation among the team members. And because of that, frustration and demotivation, their performance is, decreasing. So, if we can recognize that, then we need to understand that, to increase their performance, we need to give them more autonomy. We need to give them more empowerment and flexibility to make more decisions, right? But at the same time, autonomy doesn't mean, abandonment. That doesn't mean that, hey, I'm, giving you this task and goodbye, I'm not going to talk to you again, right? It's not that, right? So, once we delegate work, as team leaders, we need to agree on a reasonable schedule and making sure that, the timelines are met during a project. But then within that time, we need to give the flexibility and autonomy to our members to do their job and what they are hired for. And so that, they feel more empowered to achieve their tasks, right? And so we need to find the right balance between, not micromanaging, but not also abandoning, our team members to build trust with them to do so. So now, exactly. So we don't want to undervalue our subordinates, and we want, we hired them because they have certain credibility. And, if we hired them because of, given their credibility and integrity, then we need to trust them in, getting their task done within a given, time period. Exactly. So our first context was within the organization and how we build trust within the organization, within our teams. So if we think about, if we apply this to your situation, our first context is, how do we build and improve trust in, Yali, Senegal, or Yali, Kenya, right? Within Yali, Kenya. Our context number 2 is relationships across networks of organizations. So now, this new context is, how do we build trust and improve trust, let's say between, Yali, Kenya and Yali, Ghana, right? And so, we can look at this as different departments within the same organization. So how do we build trust between marketing, department and finance department? Or we can look at this in your case, how do we, build trust between Kenya and Senegal, or Ghana and South Africa, right? So that, we want these outcomes. We want more committed relationships. We want more cooperation, between, these different, organizations. We want, better conflict resolution. So if we want all these things, then we need to build more trust. So, but, how do you think this context is different than the previous one? In the previous one, we said, the focus was on, building trust between team leaders and members, or among the team members, right? Now we're talking about building trust between different organizations, between, Yali, Kenya and Yali, Ghana, right? So this is now inter-organizational trust rather than interpersonal trust, right? As opposed to person-to-person trust, now we're getting into organization-to-organization trust, right? And it makes a difference. It makes a difference as to, what the different types of outcomes are. It makes a difference how the communication takes place. And it takes a difference as to, how we perceive authenticity and credibility, in terms of, collaboration, between the organizations, that's a lot different than interpersonal trust, right? And so we really need to understand, the organizational impacts, when the trust is improved between two or, 4 different organizations, right? And so at this point, I want you guys sort of, we're gonna have 3 different breakout sessions today. This is the first one for 10 minutes. And in this breakout session, I want you guys to sort of put your heads together and come up with different examples, right? And perhaps you can start from the bottom and think about, examples of cooperation across different regional YALI leadership centers, right? So, how could YALI Ghana and YALI, Senegal could cooperate, right? And what would that cooperation look like? For what reasons would you be cooperating, right? And what would be the outcome of that cooperation? What would be some example of commitments, between YALI Ghana and YALI South Africa? And, what would that mean for your organizations? What are some examples of that? Perhaps, you can discuss that. What would be some examples of shared values, between your organizations, between YALI Ghana and YALI Kenya? What would be some examples of shared values? Is it necessary to have shared values across, these, regional centers, right? And if you do so, how do you improve trust, right? So, please discuss that and put your heads together and discuss that. And then some examples of effective communication between, YALI South Africa and YALI Senegal. What does that look like? An effective communication between those 2 organizations. Do you have any examples of that? So I want to give you guys, about 10 minutes to, put your heads together and come up with some examples of, cooperation, commitment, shared values, and effective communication that may be taking place now or in the future, and maybe come up with examples of those in the next 10 minutes. So Charlie, if you can help me with the breakout session for that, it would be much appreciated.
Yep, they all should be open now.
Great, so we can send them now.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in the main room here who has not gotten an invitation for a breakout room that needs help getting there? Looks like most people have made it. Bert, I'm going to step away for a moment. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right, is everybody back? Looks like we are back here. All right, so I'm gonna start with the room number 4 this time with Carolyn, Patricia, and Mark.
Hi, Mark,
Yes,
kindly present for us.
Thank you, Caroline, for this opportunity. So I will take you through what we've discussed on the 4 sections. Number 1 is examples of effective communication, yearly leadership centers and partners. So we update our partners on the activities that is happening in our centers, and even sometimes we act on their requests. So sharing regular updates, alumni impact, information on training and what is going on during training, and also post-training support for our alumni. Number 2, examples of shared values between yearly leadership centers and partners. So before we enter into partnerships, for example, partners who join us after we already get the funds from USAID, we normally work on an MOU whereby we agree on our shared values and how we are going to approach the partnership. And normally this is a win-win situation for both the parties. And for USAID, the values shared is cascaded down towards the centers and also the alumni chapters. So we have shared values, and this is commitment to ensuring that we empower young African leaders and ensuring that we have diversity and inclusivity in all that we do. Examples of commitment between yearly leadership centers and partners. Number 1 commitment is value for money, because a partner will want to give you money, but they want also to see the value of for each shilling or for each dollar that they give you. How is it being utilized? So ensuring that every dollar is utilized for the intended purpose and also the value for that. And the return on investment for YALI is seen towards the alumni when they go back to their organizations or countries. We see the impact that they are making and also the post-training support. Examples of cooperation between YALI leaders, leadership centers and partners. A case study or a case example of YALI Regional Leadership Center East Africa is co-creation. So the cooperation, we've had 2 co-creations with our partners. One was the DAO organization, whereby we had a special cohort specifically tailored for leaders, young leaders in renewable and renewable energy, and also for Power Africa. For DAO, it was about sustainability and renewable energy. For Power Africa, whereby we had also co-creation, we've had a cohort, a special cohort, whereby we had young leaders, young women leaders in African energy. And we have discussions with other organizations to have co-creation with that. And also we engage partners in most of the activities in the center that we have. For example, we had recently in YALI East Africa, and of course in Accra, they had a homecoming ceremony for the alumni, and they invited partners whereby they had very good cooperation together. Thank you, and over to you.
thank you so much, Mark. Team 3 with Karen, and do you guys have anything to add?
Yes, good afternoon. Under effective communication, we thought maybe compliance is the most effective thing. If you are compliant, adhering to governance issues, giving reports, it's very important. They will take you serious, and also they will be sensitive, even though the relationship might not be balanced. We are on the receiving end. So, but if you adhere to compliance, it's very important. And as far as shared values, we thought we need to abreast ourselves on their development, especially understanding their strategic objectives, so that we can align. So we hope the same should happen on the other side. So because before they invest, they want to understand what is our values, so that is it something that is worth investing in. So if we abreast ourselves with their strategic objectives as they develop, we are able to align in terms of commitment, adhering to the timelines, also making sure that we're inviting them to our events so that they can take ownership. They are not only writing checks, but they also participate and show commitment in that regard. And also, when it comes to cooperation, we must strive always to make sure that we are complementing each other in all the activities. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Team 2 with Betty.
Yes, Richard will present on our
Yeah.
behalf.
So aside what they have said, we also want to add that in terms of the shared values, we look at the fact that between us and our partners share the values that African youth needs to be empowered. I mean, in terms of their leadership skills, which has helped widen the yearly training. So this was what we considered for shared values. And for effective communication, we also discussed that, yes, for effective communication between us and our partners, the rules, the regulations are clearly written, procedures are clearly spelled out in terms of the training development and how to go about it, everything. So there is clear understanding of how the training should go. And also on commitment, we also spoke on the fact that there has been enormous commitment from our partners. They have made it clearer to us through effective communication by, providing financial support to the development of the training beyond even our current training end period. So there is that commitment. So I think we were on cooperation when our time elapsed. So this was what we discussed. Thank you
So much. Thank you. Yes, actually, time-wise, we're actually getting pretty close to the end. So I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Everything you said so far, they're very, very valuable. And I think in this specific context, transparency, as many of you mentioned, is very, very critical, because every donor, every fundraiser, they want to see how their money that they raised is going to be spent. So transparency plays a very, very big role in establishing trust in this context. But the one other thing that I want to add to some of the things that I mentioned is sharing success stories, right? So when you look at the effectiveness of communication in this context, the people who send money, they want to see some sort of success that came out of their efforts. And so in this case, for instance, in this context, sharing the success stories of the entrepreneurs that you are training, that would be very, very valuable for people to get more motivated and then to get more excited to send you more funds in that regard. So, and then our final context is, building relationships with your current and past participants, the entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs. I've actually planned for a breakout session for this one as well, but we're going to skip this one as we are getting very close to our ending time. But this is also incredibly important as well, right? Because you want an ongoing long-term relationship with the participants, with these entrepreneurs. Perhaps some of them are going to be very, very successful entrepreneurs, and in the future, they're going to be the ones that are going to be partnering with you for, bringing you new funds. And, from that aspect, that's a very, very important relationship. They're going to be the ones perhaps that's going to refer you to new participants. They're going to create this positive word of mouth. So that's why it's also a very, very important relationship as well. And so you can look for various opportunities to cooperate with them as they graduate, from your programs, and, establish that long-term commitment, because, after going through that program, they are going to have that shared value with you. So it's very, very important for you to keep that, database of everyone that is graduating from your programs, so that you can continuously communicate with them and create this long-term relationship with each of those participants. So, as you move forward, trying to figure out, okay, how we develop and, and improve trust, within and outside of our organization, just be aware that, trust is mutual, right? So, you're not the only one who needs to spend the effort to build this trust, but the external parties, the partners, the alumni, each different region, everybody needs to spend, a balanced and mutual effort in building this trust, and, and be aware that it takes time, right? Trust is not built over time. It goes through different stages. And, speaking of that, right, you got trust that is minimal level to very high and implicit level trust. So over time, you go from not having trust to minimal to neutral to moderate to high levels of trust, which again takes a long time sometimes. But communication effectiveness, having shared values, that sort of speeds up the process of this building trust over time. So I want to leave you guys with basically, to summarize, these 5 sort of action plans, right? The first one is identifying the various contexts or the shared stakeholders with which you need to develop and improve trust. So in this short session of 2 hours, we looked at the internal stakeholders, your partners, the different regional centers, and then your current and future participants. Those are all different stakeholders, but you may also come up with other ones that we did not discuss here. And then once you identify each of those stakeholders, then you can assess the different levels of trust that already exist with each stakeholder, right? And then you can apply the trust model, the causes and the consequences, the outcomes of our trust model to each of these stakeholder relationships, right? And then you can create a plan of action to improve trust with each of those stakeholders, right? And what should I improve? Do I need to improve, authenticity? Do I need to improve credibility? Sort of create an action plan with each of those stakeholders. And then finally assess whether cooperation, commitment, and conflict resolution, if those are improving as a result of the improved trust with each stakeholder. So if you can do that, and create that plan of action, that would be very, very valuable in the future operations of your organizations. So thank you again for joining me today. I'm very, very I'm honored to be spending these 2 hours with you, and I wish you guys all the best going forward. My email address and my LinkedIn information is here, so please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about what we've discussed today, please feel free to email me with any questions you may have. I understand your next session is starting, very soon. So I wish you all a very good evening, and hope to, to see you succeed in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tokman, for being with us and sharing this really valuable topic.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, very good. We are going to take a 10-minute break. So we'll get started here at about 5 minutes past the hour.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope you had a productive day, an enjoyable day. I would like to ask Amy and Charlie, if possible, can you please enable me to share slides? You need to,
Yes, absolutely. There you go.
yep, thank you. All right. So last time when we talk about the negotiation management and stakeholder management, we had some introduction. So I will not do it today because we already know many of you, and I will use this time to jump directly to the main topic of the today's session is about organizational culture. So before I start, and I have some slides and I would like to share some frameworks and what we can do with that. But before I start that, I would like to open a discussion. Do you find the topic of organizational culture, is it something important? Or maybe it's not a big deal. Let's be honest. Like there are many more important things to do in our organization. What do you think, guys?
Georgia, I think it's really important because culture is something that is very dynamic, you know, and we get a lot of influences. So sometimes we may lose track, you know, you may start out thinking you have the optimal culture. Yeah, but over time, you know, that culture can kind of degenerate into a bad culture. So it's always good to learn, you know, new cultures, you know, where are we? Yeah, and just being able to keep up to tabs, you know, with whether that culture in your organization is able to really generate the results that are anticipated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, George. And you made a lot of good points. Like you said, culture is dynamic and it can evolve, right? It's not like staying here, it can evolve. It takes time. It will not change tomorrow. It will not change next month, not even change this year. It takes time. It's not easy to change culture and it's not easy to build culture. So, but it's evolving over time, it's evolving over years, and we need to be vigilant. We need to be, you know, conscious to on the watch out how it evolves. We need to pay attention. And you also mentioned that we would like to get results. So some cultures, they can be result oriented. Some cultures can be skewed toward other directions. But this is like what we start learning and pay attention to. I see that Harry wrote is important as it informs behavior, right? So it's another good point that culture affects our behavior. This is the way we behave, and this is the end result. Depends on our behavior and also on our norms. How do you think, and so the way I would like to structure today's session, and let me know, I think it's a good time for me now to share some messages. So the way I would like to structure it for today, I have 3 parts. So in the first one, I would like to overview. So you know many things about organizational culture, you know it intuitively, or maybe you heard it before, but some ideas may be new for you. Then I would like to try to identify your culture at Yale. And I understand you have different offices, but you also like work together, you cross-fertilize each other. So it will be good to see what you think about your culture, and we'll get to this point. And then I would like to have a kind of workshop. What we would like to do. Should we stay where we are? Should we maybe aim for something different? Maybe make some slight changes, maybe more ambitious changes. We'll discuss it in the end. So, but let me start. Why? So I believe that culture is extremely important, and this is why. So let me skip to the next slide. So we teach and what we believe in, that any organization starts with a vision. You can call it a purpose, you can call it a mission, but why there should be something bigger when we start. If it's a company, it will not take you long if you start a company just to make money. If the only reason why you do this only to make money, is not sustainable. It will not work. So it's much better. It's much more sustainable long-term and more productive if there is a kind of purpose, there is a vision why you do this. So for example, in Merck, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies, their vision would be medicine is for people, profits will follow. For example, their purpose is to help people, to cure what disease they have, to give them help, and then anything else will follow. And then I will show you some other example. So you should be on fire. You would call it on fire when you start any business, any organization, any initiative. There should be bigger. So organizational culture is not, and I have to admit it, is not the first starting point. It's not. Anything start with a bigger vision. You need to be visionary. You need to know why you're doing things, what you're doing, why we are doing Yali. What do we want to do? Do we want to help local communities to have better living, maybe to make more money, maybe want to empower women and leadership? So there should be a vision why we do this. The next step, what do you think should be the next step, guys?
To plan how do we achieve that vision.
Exactly. So if I mispronounce your name, please, Modjar, please correct me. So Modjar is exactly. You just
Lloyd.
So I shared slides, but I also added a few messages. So it's not on the original presentation. That's why it's interesting to discuss it now. So the next one, we need to build a plan. How do we achieve that vision? You can call that plan a strategy, and it's a bit more than a plan. So strategic management is not only a plan, but it's also about analysis. You need to analyze, you need to formulate, and then you need to also to work on its realization. So strategy is a bit bigger than plan, and it should involve stakeholders, ideally, etc. So strategy is a bit bigger, but it's all about a plan. So Modjar is exactly right. So we need to have a strategy, and it should have not only high-level strategy, but it should also have very concrete, very specific targets. We call them strategic objectives. There should be clear goals. They should be feasible. You don't want to have goals which are unattainable. People will get discouraged. Like such a goal will be like in every country in Africa doing this, we will be able to do it in the next 3 years. So something which would be feasible. At the same time, strategy should also have ambitious goals. If your vision is not ambitious, people are not encouraged. If it's like daily, something like you do every day, and it's nothing special, people are not inspired. So your vision, your purpose, and then strategy should target ambitious goal, but also feasible goal, achievable. And then what would be next? After you have your plan and strategy, what do you think, guys, would be the next step?
Are we talking about activities?
Yeah, so you see, so the topic of today's session is about organizational culture, but I don't want to mislead you to say that the organizational culture area is the most important. No, there is a role for organizational culture, but before we get to organizational culture and the functions in place, we need to understand how the whole organization functions. And I just want to deliver the message that is everything starts with a vision. Yali has certain vision, and I went through your website, I learned certain initiatives you do. You have strategy objectives. What would be next? Once you have your plan, what do you do next, Georgia?
I wanted to say practice, because we normally talk about practice and culture, but we are now talking about implementation.
Exactly, yeah, and exactly. So you see, Modjar used word plan, and I had strategy, but it's exactly the same. Now, Georgia used word practice, but it's exactly what I have, right? So I have implementation, right? So it's about, once you have your plan, you need to implement it. You need to practice. So the next step would be to work, and you get into your daily routine, right? You need to work on a daily basis, day after day, week after week, month after month, on implementing your strategy, right? So this is the important part. This is like gives you a sequence how you do. Also, your implementation should be not like, like rigid, no changes. You can be flexible. You can review your strategy. If there is a change in the external environment, it's fine to review your strategy and be flexible, right? But once we agreed, now we need to roll out our sleeves, and then we roll up, and then we need to implement. So this is important. We start working, and now we are coming to the step, to the function that organizational culture plays. So actually, organizational culture, right, is important at all these steps, but most importantly, it plays the most important role that organizational culture plays is at the implementation stage, right? To implement our strategy, we need culture. We need effective culture. We need functioning culture, something which would be enabling us. Right? That's why it's hard to implement our strategy without having the right organizational culture. Yes, at the time of our vision, at the time of our strategy, there will be some influence of our culture. We have certain values and norms, and they will be shaping the way we develop strategy. But most importantly, and the most essential work that organizational culture plays, it will be at this stage, at the implementation. And this is 90% of our work. This is what we do daily. And this is what organizational culture role it plays. So let me now zoom in toward organizational culture a bit more. So we will, all right. So yeah, and before I define it and I give bigger definition for organizational culture, let me now also to shed light how important it is, right? Because organizational culture, it shapes our behavioral norms. It shapes, right? It shapes how the way we behave. And this is right. And by the way, I'm looking through a chat box, right? So this is what Harry wrote, right? So this is informing behavior, and this is Harry wrote at the beginning. And then I see praxis, resource implementation. Yeah. And yeah, good points in the chat. So like Georgia said, culture is strategy for breakfast. So what do you mean by that? Georgia, sorry for going back. What do you mean culture is a strategy for breakfast?
So a bad culture, of course, will mean you cannot implement a good strategy. So we have to get culture right. And that's why this training is very, very important.
Right. So without having good culture, you may not develop a good strategy, right? Your strategy may be skewed toward, I don't know, towards certain goals, maybe oriented to one group and not maybe to the broader community, or maybe it will be self-sustaining only for our own organization without seeing other stakeholders, right? So it's important to have culture, right? So I from this point, yes. So if we don't have the right culture, it will be hard to develop strategy. Some people may argue that once you have your vision and then you develop your strategy, you may start building your culture. So some organizations, they start deciding what culture we want to build after knowing their vision and strategy. So it's like chicken and egg, what goes first. But sometimes you need to know your strategy to decide on the right culture, because you cannot start building your culture without knowing what do you need to do with that culture. What do you want to build? What kind of organization? What kind of goals you have, right? You see the point. So yes and no. So culture can eat strategy for breakfast, but also culture should follow strategy to some extent, right? All right. All right. So culture defines organizational norms. So this is the way we behave, and we need to behave certain way to achieve our goals. And also because of a good culture, because the right culture, what we can achieve, people in our organization, they will be more engaged. Right? People will be doing their work not only because someone is watching them or someone is telling them, but because they believe in what they're doing. People, they show initiative, proactiveness. With the right culture, people are more engaged, and the organizational productivity, the final outcomes, is higher. We can achieve more within the certain time frame. Also, culture provides certain common purpose and identity. So we identify as ourselves with the organization. We feel we are part of Yali. We are proud of being Yali. We tell our friends about Yali. We tell what we do. So this is something I would like to share. And I feel myself part of Yali. And also, as a result, people, and also as a derivative of it, people also have higher job satisfaction. You go to work to the place that you enjoy. Someone said that the happiest person on earth would be someone who at job would like to go home because he's happy or she is happy at home. And then when at home, she's happy to go back to work. So no matter where you are, you enjoy what you're doing. So you're looking to the next workday. You come there and you enjoy. You see the purpose and what you're doing, and at work you would like to go back home. But let's define what organizational culture. Let's go deeper into this subject. So like, I guess I started with this, right? So the idea about organizational culture, it's about values, assumptions, attitudes, behaviors, and practices. It covers all of this, right? This is our organizational values. And this is kind of assumptions, right? Sometimes it's unwritten norms. We make assumptions what Yali wants, what Yali would like, what is like common norms that Yali have to behave. We might be right, we may be wrong, but this forms our culture. It's not written. People understand it, right? By default, by seeing others doing this. Also, culture typically would have 4 attributes, right? Is shared. It's not about one person. So if you have certain values, attitude, the organizational culture is not only about you. It should be shared. Other people should have common understanding. Other people should have common values about this. So culture, one of the most important attributes of organizational culture, it should be shared. It's not only about one person. And it's also, like I wrote here, it's not only about being average, right? You look at like 3 people, they think we should be very competitive, we should be very collaborative, and you take average, we will be 50%. It's not average. It should be like you look at the group and you look at this perceived understanding what we do. So another way, another attribute of organizational culture is pervasive. It should go through all the level of the organization. It's not only about the top management. If it's only the CEO of the company, or if it's only the leadership team, if it's only the directors of each office of Yali, then it's not organizational culture. Again, we are talking about certain individuals or maybe mini small teams. So culture should be pervasive. It should go across all the levels and it applies very broadly to the whole organization. Next one will be enduring. And this is interesting. And here I put more because it seems that culture, what makes organization sustainable. The culture makes it long run. And remember at the very beginning of our session, I mentioned that it's hard to change it immediately. It takes time. And that's why it's enduring. And it's also at some point, it becomes self-selection. Certain people, they create this organizational culture in a company, and then it becomes self-selection. People who will be joining this company, they'll be fitting in this certain culture. These people who hire, who select, they're already looking for certain values, certain characteristics of the new hires. And people who join also, those will stay who share this culture. And if you don't share, if you don't believe in this culture, some people would leave, right? So it becomes natural process that culture becomes self-shaping itself because we will be, each of us will be helping to build it, and people who will be joining and leaving is also part of this. And this is, it's a good point, like Georgie said, it's very important for any organization, it's very important for Yale, it's very important for our university, James Madison University. Also, what culture we have, how the way we work with students, we teach, we treat them as well. This is extremely important. And the last important attribute is implicit, right? So it's wired, like in the air. you don't have to write it. There is no sense to write your culture. You would never see someone to say, like, write a document. This is our culture. Everyone, please hang it on your wall, read it every day and behave like this. It doesn't work this way. It's not culture. It's not about culture. So it's implicit. This is the way we'll talk about how to build the culture, right? But this is kind of people by default, by convention, they understand we need to behave this way because I see around and it looks like this is the spirit of our teamwork, right? So, and you can call it, I like this phrase, a kind of silent language, right? So you may think about it's a language, but you don't speak much, but we share and we understand the same language. All right, let me now I use a bit different order. This is the way we built. All right, now, so what I would like to do, and just let me move my. Okay, so again, we talk about unwritten, internalized. There are alternatives to culture. Not every organization has well-developed cultures. Some teams would rely a lot on rewards and boundaries. Let me explicitly say, some companies, some organizations would not invest their time and efforts into culture. Instead, they would heavily rely on rewards. For example, in some sales type organizations, there would be clearly like, metrics. If you manage to sell within this week certain amount, you will get a bonus. You will get certain percentage. You will get a commission. So as such, there is no culture at all. It would be very transactional. You do this work, you get rewarded. People would not communicate to each other very often. And even if they do, it will be you would not have the spirit like permeating the organization. Another way how companies can function without investing into culture would be boundaries. Is certain policies, rules, and if someone violates certain rules, they'll be penalized one way or another. Maybe they can receive a negative pay rate. So for example, they may be not promoted, or they'll be staffed on a project they don't like. It's another way to do. It's another transactional way to run organizations. Instead of investing into culture, you would focus on developing very rigid, detailed policies, and they'll be punishing those transgressors who will be not following them. Of course, each organization has rewards. Of course, each organization has certain policies and rules, and you need to do it. You cannot run otherwise, but they should not be overemphasized. If you start overemphasizing your rewards and boundaries, it's a clear sign it's not about organizational culture. You're skewed toward other types of running organization. You can run this organization, but it will be less effective. So I would like to open again to all of you. Why would you think that focusing on rewards and boundaries too much would be less effective than building organizational culture? I don't know, I might suggest, do you mind if I start calling some people, and you can share your thoughts. If you don't have much to say, that's fine, but just in case. Karen, would you like to share your thoughts? What do you think? Why do you think building culture is more effective for an organizational life than over focusing on rewards and boundaries?
I think that, you can have everything in place. You can have your strategies, you can have your objectives, you can have your daily operations, but if you do not have people that are motivated, not necessarily because of rewards and incentives, but basically because of the fact that they buy into the mission and the vision, and they have a shared value in terms of what the organization will achieve. If you don't have that, you will not achieve what you set out to do. So I think everything revolves around people and staff and human resources, and that needs to be managed in a proper manner.
Yeah, it's amazing what you said. Thank you, Karen. Exactly. People will get at some point. So, and again, I'm not calling for not giving rewards. Of course, we need to have decent pay. Everyone should be well paid. Everyone should have certain rewards, maybe by the end of the year, but it should not be like, over focusing. Every day you just check in, etc. No, they should be in a healthy way. It should be done. So don't overemphasize, do it in a proper way, and you do this, right? And like Karen said, if you over focus, overemphasize, at some point you start losing sight of your end goals. You're just focusing too much on certain ways, either like a fear of being punished, or either like becoming too much greedy on rewards without seeing bigger purpose, right? You can kill even your intrinsic motivation. Like focusing too much on something which is external, which is not part of you, but external, it will kill an internal motivation to do the things. It's a good way. So motivation is part of this. Betty, please.
Yes, I would say that working on culture is better at building authenticity, which is part of trust, because it's not about carrot and stick. I think it makes individual work very authentic. It makes team cohesion very authentic. So I think at the end of the day, it probably improves efficiencies. It probably makes for a long-lasting organization, what we call in business a going concern, because even when people leave, if you have new hires that then come and plug into this organization, and this is the way things have been done, I think I'm being done in a way that we probably continue doing process improvement, but really in terms of culture, I think above all, it makes a team and individuals very authentic in the way they engage. So I think it's fantastic to promote a great working culture. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good point. Thank you, Betty. So it makes your organization authentic. It's a great point, right? This organizational culture that we build, our Yelly culture is authentic, right? We internalize it. We feel part of it. We identify ourselves, right? So each person has identities, and like I'm a man, I'm a woman, for example, a mom, I'm a dad, I'm a consultant, I'm an engineer. So we have, and in certain identities goes to the front. Sometimes you identify more yourself with a gender, you identify yourself more with your profession, with the organization, right? You can identify yourself as a basketball player, very good with this, and it becomes like this identity goes up front and becomes more. So building this culture, it moves your identity up front of who you are, right? Since we don't want to say it's all about you, but it's important. It's not somewhere in the rear, in the backyard, but it's part of what you do daily life, right? And this is authentic what you do, and you believe in this, right? Also, another way to think about this is about why organizational culture is more effective or run and more efficient is because you mentioned, Betty also mentioned, you trust your people, but also you rely on them. So you don't have to supervise them too often. You don't have to look over their shoulders, what they do, etc. So once you trust your people, it removes such a big chunk of your work, of your daily work, for leaders, for managers, just trying to see what your people do. If people share your organizational culture with you, now you have right people in the right places. You can rely on what they do. There is no need to micromanage. With the right organizational culture, when people share it, it saves a lot of time. Now you feel you one team, you rely on what they do. They will do it on time. They will do high quality work, because this is kind of culture of our team. You don't have to always remind them. You don't have to always follow up. You don't need to have those check-in points every other day. Let's have a meeting and see what you've done. Organizational culture solves this. It's a big advantage. Having the right, effective organizational culture, it's a big, springboard. It just makes the organization leap forward a lot. That's why many teams, and it's for many companies, for many organizational culture is one of the top priorities for the management. How do we build this culture so we become more effective? So Georgia also wrote rewards and incentives are implicit to culture. That's true. So again, so rewards and we'll talk later. And I guess this is also overlaps with what Jory said. We can use rewards and incentives as a tools to build culture. It helps. It shouldn't be our end goal to rely solely on rewards, but they can be used as tools, how to help, to shape it certain way, how to prioritize certain behavior. And this rewards is a great tool to prioritize, right? Rewards is like nothing can do better in the short term to prioritize our behavior as reward. This is what helps a lot, right? So here I would like to make very important statement that organizational culture, and I partially touch upon this, cannot be just decided. Like today, 15 of us will join together, we'll make a statement, we decide and done. We live today, we have organizational culture. It takes a lot of time, right? That's why the way how it works, it should be cultivated, it should be encouraged, it should be fertilized. So you spend time building, cultivating, nurturing the culture, and then it becomes self-sustaining. Remember, one of the points we mentioned is endurance. It's self-protecting itself. Once you build the culture, it's becoming self-selection. It selects the people who share this culture, and it also gets rid of people who are not ready to work this way or another way, right? That's why it's important to spend time, but let's not think that it's just like a decision. It's not a decision. Most of all, it's aiming on certain behavior, cultivating it. How would we cultivate this culture? And this is several ways. So first, to make it right straight, so building a desired organizational culture is a key, I would say, activity of a leadership. It should be something that leadership. So it's not something in the peripheral work. It should be upfront, something in the spotlight, something like the attention should take. So this is very key leadership activity, but it's not only about leaders. We talk about it should permeate the whole organization. Everyone should share, but this is leaders should take ownership. It's not someone will build it. What does it mean taking ownership? By the way, how do you understand the term taking ownership? How do you understand it? So if you don't mind, James, like from your perspective, so taking ownership in a project or taking ownership in certain, like what does it mean?
Moja here, I think taking ownership would be making it everybody's responsibility or someone's responsibility to make sure that they play a very important part also in influencing the organizational culture in a positive way. If I may go back to the key to organizational culture as a key leadership activity, you said the leaders are not responsible for deciding on the culture, but they are an extension, or let me put it this way, they are influencing the direction of the organizational culture through policies that must be developed within the organization. For example, we would come up with the HR policies on rewards or policies on diversity, embracing diversity, and other policies that would also influence the way people would behave within the organization. Thanks.
That's a good point. And like you mentioned about responsibility, so it's part of taking this, right? And it's well said. And also to add that taking ownership is like, it's like becoming your baby. This project or what you're working on, no one needs to remind you what has to be done today or next week. No one needs to follow up with you. You're taking ownership. You proactively work on this. You think you just take responsibility, like what Harold said. You take responsibility for what you're doing, and it's self-driven. You proactively work on this. and like not taking ownership would be just receiving tasks. Someone tells you to do this and you do. Once you finish, or maybe you're not even on time, you do another one. So you're not taking ownership. You don't see a big picture. You're just given work, you finish with work and that's it. And I don't know, high quality work, maybe not. So taking ownership, you do your best to make sure you achieve this. So to build organizational culture, people should take ownership. They need to daily on their work, they need to think about this. What kind of culture we're building, what we would like to do. So then Betty, right, who takes ownership? A champion. So you think about the project champion. So typically the term project champion is the one who would like this project to happen, drive the champion, promotes, right? So it's taking ownership for the leadership first. So they should take accountability for building organizational culture. And if it's not the desired culture, they should take responsibility. Maybe we see some unethical behavior. I try, but I cannot cope with it. I cannot make sure, then take responsibility. If something unethical happened, then we need to also to take part of this and think how to dissolve it, for example. So taking ownership is already saying I'm part of this and developing these projects. So primarily it's about the managers, like top managers, middle level managers, people, but eventually the whole organization should be working on developing this culture because it's part of everything. Culture is not certain group of people. The whole organization should share it. Another way would be to be a role model. Perhaps is one of the most effective ways is not only to propagate and promote, but also to be a role model. If, for example, I saw an example in a company when the leadership team said our employees coming late to work and we would like to change it. So from tomorrow morning, like there was a big communication, we need to start at 8 a.m., no later. So it was communicated everywhere. So consultants came on time, analysts came on time, some managers came on time, but a couple of partners didn't. They came as usual, 10:30, they had something. So if you want to instill certain rules, be a role model. So walk what you talk about, right? So like you made a decision, now show it to others. And in many other areas, if you want to build transparency, if you want to build a transparent organization, then explain how certain decisions are made. So that's being a role model is one of the biggest, it can have biggest effects on your organization. Another way to do that would be leveraging storytelling. So we don't talk much about this, but this is maybe the biggest contributor in building a culture. So storytelling is, for example, imagine you join an organization and then the first day you go to water cooler in your hallway, or you go to grab a cup of tea or coffee, and you meet with your co-workers on your floor, and they share stories. This is one person did this, and this is what happened, and then this is a problem with supplier, but then finance department jumped in, and this is how it was resolved. Hearing all these stories, what happened, how it was resolved, what management said. So hearing the story, it shapes your view. You understand how things are done in this company. So storytelling, one of the biggest contributors. So it's good. It's good to create these stories. It's good to share. Feel free to share stories. Like if you have a story about something, share with your people around you, and they will learn. Each story contributes to the culture. Another way would be to leverage in rallies and pep talks. For example, when you have town hall meetings. So town hall meetings shouldn't be only about certain topic. It's one way to do that, would be right that today's topic is about we are launching new initiatives. This is what we do, but use it in parallel to shaping your culture. Mention several points, like try to promote certain ideas. Maybe you want to publicly recognize some people who were doing exactly what you would like to do in certain culture. So public recognition can help a lot. Those people would feel they are valued, and others would see that management pays attention. So these large meetings use this opportunity, right? This is like to help to promote the stories. And finally, there are tools. There are certain tools like this reward system is a tool, right? You may reward certain behaviors. You may also put boundaries, like we would not cross this line. This is red line. This is our boundary. And no, if I see this behavior, I would not like to see this behavior repeated again. For example, your performance evaluation, in your regular performance evaluation, they can be also part of the policies, procedures, and others. All right. Now, what I would like to, we are moving to the second part of our today's session about the organizational culture, and what I would like to suggest. I saw Amy send you a 2-page document, and this is a questionnaire about organizational culture. So what I would like to suggest, let's use 5 minutes. If you need more, it's also fine. So let me pull this questionnaire. Let me just explain how to work with this. So let me. Yeah. All right, so let me share my screen. So you all, hopefully you all received this document. And basically you have 24 questions. So what I would like to kindly ask you, if you don't have to print, you can write on paper. If you can print, you can do that. So basically when you look at this question, think about your office at Yale, or think about the whole Yale organization if you have a bigger view of this. So basically the organization is a very personal place. It's like an extended family. People seem to share a lot of themselves. Some people would agree, some people would not agree. And there is a scale from 1 to 5. 5, it seems this statement is very similar to your Yale office. If you think it's yes, no, maybe so you reply neutral to this, or you can choose 1 if your office you think is far from being that, right? So I would like please to ask you to answer all these 24 questions, and then take your questions and try to provide here, like where you provide. For the first question, if you gave 4, write 4. For the second, good. Then please calculate your total. So after 5 minutes, I would like to ask you one question. What is the highest dimension you received, right? Did you receive like 20 for clan, or did you receive 23 for hierarchy, or for market, or meritocracy? And then I will explain in more details what this type of culture they stand for. So please take 5 minutes. I just need to know the totals for 4 dimensions. Do you have any questions about this? Good. So please let's do that. And once you're ready, we'll proceed. So Mark, I saw you just joined. What we are doing now, we have a 2-page assessment document shared by Amy earlier. So please open the assessment. The assessment looks like this. Let me go to the first page. So it just Amy shared about an hour ago. So please complete this assessment, keeping in mind your Yale office, your site, for example, if you work. I don't know exactly where you work for. And then we'll talk. So please complete these questions and then summarize your replies here in the table.
Yes, and it would actually be an email from Charlie. I'm going to give him the credit for sending out
the
the
Charlie,
email.
email from
Yes.
Charlie, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yeah,
so to look for an email from Charlie.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie.
Yep, no problem.
Hi, Sergi.
Yes,
Please, if we are done, email it back.
please say it again, Rich.
I said, when we are done with answering the question, should we email it
No,
back?
I would like to ask you, can you please write in the chat your dimension, highest dimension, the dimension that got the highest score? So there are 4 dimensions. Like you see, there is a clan, adhocracy, market, and hierarchy.
Hierarchy, yeah.
Hierarchy, right? If you have 2 dimensions that are very close and they are very high, you can mention 2 dimensions. So basically, when I see many of you wrote in the chat that the highest dimensions, then I think we can proceed further. So the end of your self-assessment should be writing in the chat box about your highest dimension.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to check how far are you in your assessment? Did you complete it or?
When we're done, right?
So
Oh,
what do we, okay,
Please, yeah, once you're done, please write in the chat the highest dimension, just the name, whether it's clan or market,
Okay.
or just one word. If it's too high, if you have 2 dimensions very high, please write 2. All right, Harry wrote 20, market 23. Thank you, Harry. Georgia, did you finish? Did you complete your assessment?
I did, I'm just typing right away.
Okay, good. Thank you. What how far in your assessment? Just checking, I'm curious. Karen, how's it going? Are you just to understand, like, is it?
No, I'm good. It's just that I've got 3 that are very close together.
Can you please write them? That would be great. Please write all 3. All right. Padmore, thank you so much. So Padmore has hierarchy and market. Okay, good. If you have several very close to each other, 19, 20, 21, please write all 3. It's okay. You can have culture overlapping with all these 2 or 3 dimensions. Mark, I saw you join a bit later. Did you have a chance to start working on this?
Yes, doing the final tally.
Good. Thank you, Mark. All right. I see Georgia wrote adhocracy 28, market 26. Good. So far we have market. Many people share market. A couple of people mention hierarchy. Also, a couple of people mentioned adhocracy. So adhocracy, we already have 3 people. Karen also mentioned adhocracy as the highest dimension. It's interesting. So what I will do then, I will try to describe each of the dimensions And we will see. Maybe like it will be something insightful for Yali to think about the way we perceive and what we want to is it this is what we want to build, or maybe it makes sense for us to think about if any fine-tuning needed. All right, so I see Karen wrote that Hocracy clan is also very high for Karen. This is interesting. Yeah. Betty, hierarchy and market high. Good. So I see Padmore is also mentioned about this. So like a bit similar. Market at Hocracy, right? Modhar. So market at Hocracy. We have Georgia also wrote about this. Yeah. So I don't know whether you're from the same office. I would like to get to know you more, or maybe you're working on similar projects, or maybe it's like individual perception, but this is interesting to look at it, right? So Modhar and Georgia, are you from the same office or not?
Again? No.
No. Okay. Okay. All right, so let me start. So those who did not share the results of your self-assessment, please share in the chat, but I will move on with my presentation. So let me go right, next. And thank you for doing that. I think it helps me a lot. All right, so this is the questionnaire that you completed is developed by two organizational behavior scholars. Their names are Kim Cameron and Robert Quinn. They are from the University of Michigan. They developed it about 25 years ago, and this become today is a prevailing framework when it comes to organizational behavior to understand. There are many views. There are many approaches to organizational behavior, but this one is the most commonly used approach as a first step to understand what is our organizational culture. So, and this framework is built on 2 dimensions, right? So the first dimension, so you can think about this in terms of how flexible we are. Are we focusing on flexibility and giving employees discretion? Is it a big part of our organization? Or stability and control? This is what we are focusing more, is like more interested, and this is what we appreciate. And the other dimension is about internal focus versus external focus. So external focus meaning like we see our organization and we always compare it. We compare it to the market. We compare it to the environment, like to similar organization. We compare what other similar projects are done. And it's important comparison point, or we're more focused within our organization, like what we're doing inside and not so much comparing to external. So let's look at some, and I got more responses, right? So I see Mark wrote that Hocracy is high in market, and it's interesting. So I assume this is named Rich, right? So Rich wrote clan is a bit lower, while market and hierarchy are the highest, right? So this I see some similarities. So market hierarchy, some people also mentioned. Good. So let me go into details what each of them is. So when those people who mentioned clan, we had a few, not many, but a few. And this type of organization, you may think of this as a kind of extended family. So this is kind of a friendly place when people come and share what is on their mind, and leaders in this organization, they're more like mentors and they help to develop the employees. It's like very friendly environment, right? You understand what we mean by extended family. So sometimes you may find it in startups when you have small organization, you can say when a smaller size, it can happen. the bigger the organization, the much harder is to keep clan culture, but some companies can manage this, right? So we have certain high loyalty, tradition, high commitment. So a lot of emphasis on people development. Then the next one, and I got new response. So we have Vintakud wrote that very high market, and we'll get to market, right? So the next one is adhocracy. If I can describe the adhoc culture in one word, it would be creativity. This type of organization puts a lot of focus on being innovative, how to come up with new ideas to make it work. So innovation, and you can look at especially at high-tech companies, many of these companies, they focus on adhocracy, how like, and you might look at why, because every year they need to come up with new release of their products. Apple has iPhones every September, you have models 13, 14, 15 coming soon, right? So this kind of culture, everything is toward being entrepreneurial, everything toward coming up with something new, right? So leaders, they're looking for this innovation, right? Innovation is kind of a glue that's the whole organization. So experimentation. When you go into hallways, people would share their project, their ideas, what they would give kind of pieces of advice to each other, how to improve, how to make it better, how can we make it more efficient, more productive, right? So this kind of culture is about innovation. The next one, market, is, again, if I can describe it in one word, it would be get the job done, get the results. We want to achieve results. Everything is focused on getting, like, in a timely manner to produce what is supposed to be done, right? So result oriented, getting the job done, competitive. It's very competitive. So it's also part of external, because you always compare yourself to similar firms. You see how they're doing. If it would be a profit organization, you would be looking at your profits. You would be looking at your market share. Are we growing? Are we bigger than our competitors? How can we get? If it's a non-profit organization, you would still be looking at the amount of the grant funds you're getting. You would be looking at the outreach, who has bigger outreach, more community members involved, maybe more graduates of this program, more members, participants, right? But you compare yourself. So market, getting the results, and this is also part of your evaluation. When you talk to your subordinates, when you talk to your coworkers, this is always big part, like making in a timely manner, and you need to produce what was told, right? And the last type of the culture is hierarchy. So in the hierarchy, and again, it's not like results only important for the market culture, not at all. In the clan culture, people, of course, they also achieve results. In adhocracy, of course, they achieve results, and the same going in hierarchy. But results are not like the main topic of the discussion and attention among the people. What matters here is the way how you structure your work. Maybe it's more formalized, maybe it's more structured. You need to follow certain way you do. In some, maybe some Asian cultures, it will be a lot of seniority, for example, certain people, certain tenures, certain number of users who work, they can access to certain type of work, etc. So this one way would be to do. But like in modern corporation, hierarchy is about how you structure your work, so it's also about bureaucracy. And don't think that bureaucracy is something bad. In our daily language, when you say bureaucratic, you usually have like negative connotation, but actually bureaucracy is needed. For companies, you need to have certain bureaucracy. Bureaucracy was developed by Max Weber as a concept, and he wanted to show, to run more sophisticated organization, you need to have certain rules. And this is what hierarchy culture is about. You have to follow certain procedures, right? You need to have people who would be coordinated and making sure that our policies are maintained. You produce formal rules and you would expect them to be followed, right? So it's about like how to make it safe, stable, just follow this rule, and this is what would happen, mentioned. All right, I see Carolyn wrote. So Carolyn said that hierarchy is the highest, right? And the other dimensions, they receive a bit smaller number of points. Let's look at some kind of our description here, what you would see. So for example, when it comes to clan culture, you would see more collaborative. So people more collaborating, maybe they would have easier just right to resolve things. You just come up, pick a phone, just make a call, you do it together. It's not like only independent work, but there'll be more a lot of like as a team. You can each other helping a lot. Adhocracy would be more creative, as we said. So leaders in adhocracy will be more entrepreneurial, more visionaries, like all about innovative outputs. When it comes to market, so people will be right, like again, as we mentioned, so a competing environment, not only externally, but also internally. People feel there is a kind of like, you need to perform, maybe outperform, right, to get certain reputation. And also hierarchy, it's a lot of control and coordination. So people and the leadership team, there are a lot of coordination and organization roles here, right? There's a lot of coherence, a lot of consistency. So, and you can also see kind of a critical competencies you need to build, right? So this is like clan is about relationship. Relationship is key, how you build your relationship, how you develop. When it comes to market, right? How you would energize, how would you inspire employees to deliver superior work and make sure we hit those targets in market culture is that. So when it comes to innovation is about like how we make continuous improvement. While it comes to hierarchy, how we coordinate. Maybe we have sophisticated nature of our work and we need a lot of coordination, otherwise things will not work. So this kind of coordination control would play a big role, right? So, and this is like, as an example, there are some certain industries, again, I'm going for profit, but then we can also apply for non-profit certain types. Some for profit, for example, you see high tech is toward adhocracy, right? Adhocracy like Facebook, Google, all these companies, they would have a lot of adhocracy culture. Samsung, for example, now their culture changed, and I have a business case about them. So adhocracy is a big part. Some companies, especially in financial service, it will be a lot of about market, and this is market. You will be focusing a lot of about competition. You need to outgrow the market. When it comes to standard manufacturing hierarchy, maybe in this part, people don't, maybe they don't have a lot of autonomy. There is a certain routine work, so their hierarchy would play. So US government, the same hierarchy. So you can find it in many governmental type organizations that hierarchy will be big part of the way they structure it. But maybe when you run these sophisticated projects, you need to have certain control and coordination, right? Maybe it's interesting to look at the case of Apple, right? So at the time when still Steve Jobs started the company, and Brian Wozniak and other co-founders, the company was very autocratic. It was very innovation focused. Over time, Apple moved toward clan. It was a like still smaller size team. Everyone knew each other. There would be like top 100 people who would be meeting regularly, who would be making decisions, and then these decisions would be cascaded down to the rest of the team. But the team, you could see and know each other by face. The moment Apple grew, it was hard to keep it clan. It was hard to keep it. So of course, over the evolution of the company, and when you employ more than 50,000 employees globally, it's hard. So today you see they went through hierarchy. They had to develop very rigid rules. So after the Steve Jobs left, Tim Cook, the new CEO of the company, focused a lot on making the certain procedures and rules work. He also focused on culture. So Steve Jobs, you would be surprised, but he was more toward boundaries. He's a lot of expectation, pressures his employees to deliver, but it was a lot of also, penalties. Some teams were disbanded if they deliver results. While Tim Cook came, he had to build a bit different culture, more like culture with creativity and thriving for employees. So hierarchy. And today, Apple, which is typical for large companies, is about market. It's very competitive. It has to compete. It has to prove that it's is #1 company, right, in many industry segments and also hierarchy. Right, and so what I would like to ask you, going back to Yali, so the result that you shared, right, the result that you shared in the chat and the self-assessment and the description that I provided to these 4 types of organizational culture, do you think they reflect the description, and does it reflect how Yali works in your office or overall as an organization?
Come again?
Hi, CJ.
Yes.
It's Harry. I think my analysis was spot on because I scored high for market. And I mean, Yali is a project with specific deliverables. So that's where the main focus is primarily. So it's very much results driven. So in that regard, I think it's very applicable.
And I understand, right? In many project type work, it's very important you get the, like you have a plan and you have to work on this, and you need to achieve the initial objective that you have for your projects, right? For certain like type, you need to hit this target because you have to also to report what has been done. So thank you for sharing, right? So I see, so Rich, I wrote yes, right? And you said that you also mentioned market and hierarchy was second. So Rich, would you like to elaborate a bit more? Like,
Okay, yes. So when I did my score, market and hierarchy, I mean, was the top 2. Just as I said, Yali, it's all about leadership program, and Yali is not the only leadership program in the market. There are other leadership, training also available in the market. So it's like we are kind of in a more or less like a competition. So what distinguish Yali, from other leadership training, or what is Yali offering that would want people to attend Yali more than the other leadership training? So in this case, it depends on the products. We should be very competitive in the market so that Yali will be the first point of call when the youth wants to attend any leadership training. And also, it's hierarchical, because the structure is intentionally set up in a way that it's more of hierarchical. So information, power, everything runs from top to the bottom. So that's why I had market and hierarchy as the top 2. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. It makes sense. So my wife worked for the United Nations in a couple of countries, and like many of the things that you shared, right? So Rich, you shared, and it resembles, right? It resembles with me that like you have certain like programs and you have certain time frame, and this is what has to be done, and it can work. Georgie, what do you think?
Yes, I just wanted to weigh in around adhocracy. And this is because as much as we are implementing a project and, everything is down in a contract, but there is always room to maneuver, to enhance the outputs, So the point where I'm raising this is in some cases, you have to think innovatively of how to achieve, a particular output that is set out in that particular contract. Yeah, because the details around how you're going to implement, in most cases, they are not down on paper. because, for example, you have deliverables and then you have the means of verification. So you have to think through innovatively how you are going to, and that's why I just felt I needed to weigh in on the adhocracy bit. Yes.
Yeah, it makes sense completely. Absolutely, it makes sense. Sometimes you have this limited time and you need to achieve, right, the certain objectives, and you have limited budget and you have limited staff, right? And how would you do this? And the way to make it work, you have to be creative, maybe, right? You may think out of the box in some cases, and I see why it's important, right? And it absolutely makes sense to me. Anyone else who would like to share like the results of your self-assessment and whether you think it the way it is and so Karen, you also, yes, please, Emmy.
Yes, I just have a question for you. Is it fairly common for people working within the same organization to have very different perceptions of the culture? Because I categorized everybody in the different offices, and there are clearly similarities, but there are clearly differences within the same offices. So I just love to hear you say more about that sense of perception.
And I see a reaction from Georgie. He's like smiling, laughing, right? So this is common if you don't have so if the culture is really strong and like completely shared, you would have more unifying, but not always, because people at different levels, someone would be senior and junior, or people at different projects, you still have different teams, right? You have different dynamic. You might have different stakeholders involved. Sometimes it might. So usually I would expect there would be one, if it's a really market-oriented organization, I would expect 70–80% to clearly say market. Because if the organization is very result-driven and you're evaluated on your results, and it's the focus of your weekly or monthly meetings with the management, then it will become. But if it's loose and you can do things a bit like under each initiative project a bit differently, it also depends on your role in this project, then you would maybe have a bit, right? So for example, I see that Karen, and I wanted to check, she mentioned clan, right? And this is interesting. And I thought maybe Karen also wanted to share why it scored high. It's not the highest, but it's still scored high, and why. And if you would like to share, Karen.
Yes, I think one has to look at it as you indicated, the differences between people, obviously, I think also relates to the different portfolios that we are attached to. And I think that once you analyze the different portfolios and where people function within the ROC structure, you might find, that there's alignment. But specifically from my perspective, I think moving into a sustainability phase and having done what we've done up until now as we've done it, we need to look beyond what we are currently doing and also concentrate then on additional ways or sources of income, being creative, innovative in terms of how are we going to become sustainable by still maintaining our current scope of deliverables. And I think the best way in terms of being creative should be then in terms of a collaborative effort where you have buy-in from people. Otherwise, moving beyond what we are currently doing, moving outside of your comfort zone will result in chaos. So once you move beyond your comfort zone into new territory, what are we going to explore going forward? It should be done with buy-in in terms of a collaborative effort. And I think from that perspective, you know, moving into a sustainability phase, it can change over time. I think once one has achieved, or once one has determined, okay, this is what we are going to do and this is how we're going to approach it, and we do have buy-in from people, I think then changing over to a market related approach would be great, because obviously then you now have to compete for a market share together with other youth development programs. Up until now, I think we have been safe and we've been protected.
No, but it totally makes sense. And you need to get buy-in, right? Like Karen, you said, and that's why it's important you collaborate and people contribute, right? And it's a good point. Also, I would like to use this moment to advertise my second session. So on Thursday, I will be running this session about program sustainability. And I would like to, I would be happy to see each and every of you on this session, because I'll be talking about how to make programs sustainable. So for example, you may see one of the largest donors maybe leaving, and I assume this is the case with USAID and YELI. And like, what are the best practices? How would you keep it running? How would you keep it sustainable? So on Thursday, the first session will be mine, and I will be talking about ensuring program sustainability. So you're welcome to come, and this is what Karen mentioned. Now we are getting into the sustainability phase, that it's important we talk about this and we think how to work and how to make it successful, right? So please join. All right. So let me move on to the next. Let me share a few more slides. So we talk at the Cameron and Keane framework, but there are others, and this is kind of an alternative way. So the scholars who work on this, it's a recent also work they developed by Grossberg, Lee, Price, and Chen. You see in the source, but what they developed, they took a framework from Cameron and Lee, flexibility and stability, right? So are you flexible, or you would like to keep this certain hierarchy and make it safe and stable, right? So, and also, but they introduce change a bit. So it's about independence, how people work. So it's not about internally, externally focused, it's about independence and interdependence. And you can look from this perspective, right? So like, for example, if it's independence and instability result in authority, or it's safety and order, right? It's a bit resembles hierarchy, for example, stability and interdependence. We can think, so it's another way to look. So I'm just giving you alternative way, it depends, because when YELI will be thinking about organizational culture, and we'll get to this in our session, and I hope you will continue doing that. So this is another way just to keep in mind and think. And then, the scholars, they try to map companies and organizations on this map, right? For example, so Tesla, for example, which would be prioritizing maybe learning. For example, I'm interested in things that change the world, that affect the future. And you can find from the top leadership team, and you can look at their website, and you can look at corporate values, what they do. So they try for Whole Foods, which is like one of the top examples when you talk about stakeholder management. For example, companies should create value not only for shareholders, but for all stakeholders, customers, employees, communities, suppliers. Also, like John Mackey, he's a co-founder. Most of the greatest companies in the world also have great purposes. Having a deeper, more transcendent purpose is highly energizing for all the various, right? So, and you can see how companies are mapped here, right? So this is Huawei would be like large Chinese company, telecom company. You will see like financial, for example, services like entertaining, Disney, etc. So this is a good example. Another thing, what let me go here. So also companies and the leadership teams and the whole, like the whole body of the companies can think what we would like to build. So as a starting point, it would be good to reflect. And it's good that you wrote in the chat, so you have a starting point, how people perceive. Many people said that you're running Yali offices more like market and hierarchy. Some people, what you mentioned, is adhocracy. A few of you mentioned is clan. So it's good to know, like, and Emmy is like, it's amazing that you try to map by 4 different offices and then see how they're coherent, or there may be some differences and different perception. So it's a starting point to think, to map where we are. And then would be to get together and think what we would like to do. Would we like to keep having focus on market and hierarchy? Or maybe we would like to have a bit more of clan. And this is what Karen said, you need to get buy-in. You would need to focus maybe more on developing employees. You need maybe to focus more on the relationship within the teams. And this is what clan culture is about. So this is an example of a company, right? This is a company. They did exactly, they were at the stage where Yali was, and they got together as a team and they started thinking where we are and what we want to do. And this is what they decided. They said, we want to have more clan, so not to get into the extreme, but we would like to have a bit more clan and a bit more innovation, adhocracy, and slightly decrease maybe hierarchy and market. And also what they wrote down, just to make sure, when we want to have clan culture, it doesn't mean we want to have an undisciplined, you see, like we are permitting anything. We don't want to perpetuate cliques or like, you know, like some teams and mini groups and like no inclusion. So when we say clan, we don't want to have like, you know, like everyone total love without getting results, etc. It's not. So they wrote clearly, and it's a particular example. It's a workshop and they finished their workshop with this. So we don't want to have this. It does not mean, but when we say clan, we would like to have to understand more about employee needs. So we should shed light. It should be like more of our attention. We would like to promote a bit more teamwork. We would like to be more participative among our teams. We would like to recognize, to acknowledge some team players, right? We would like to foster better morale, right? Maybe higher trust. So they wrote this. So as the first step, you map what you do, and then you think where we would like to get. What is our point of destination? Where we would like from point A to point B? What is our point B? And then you need to write. Also, when you want to, for example, you would like to decrease a bit, and this is their case. Maybe it doesn't apply to Yali, but just an example. When you want to decrease hierarchy a bit, right? Maybe you want to, you know, like to prune some rules and procedures. You would like to eliminate maybe something what makes it over bureaucratic. Again, bureaucracy is good. Over bureaucratic would be something can be improved. Maybe certain rules can be applied when you need to get certain, for example, in their case, in that company, when they needed to make a payment, they had 3 levels of approvals. Do you really need to get 3 people to sign off? Is it enough maybe to have 2 levels or 1? So up to a certain budget, if we are talking about up to 5,000, it's enough for 1 person to approve. If we're talking about up to 50,000, 2 people. If it's already higher than 200,000, maybe 3 people and the head of the office. So they decided to make clear rules, and you don't have to go through all these bureaucratic procedures. For example, right? So do we need unneeded reports? So maybe like by the end of the project, every quarter, but do we need to produce this work? So as an example, what this company, they said, like, so what we mean by decreasing hierarchy, we want to decrease some unnecessary paperwork, right? Maybe we want to decrease some micromanagement, and we would like to build the organizational culture which would empower employees, give them more ownership, right? We would give them more autonomy, right? But autonomy, again, you need to write. Autonomy doesn't mean that you do whatever you want. No, you need to deliver in a timely manner what should be done. And this is example with the market culture, right? When we say decrease market culture, we don't mean ignore the competition. It's important. For Yali, it's very important we stay very competitive in the market. It's very important that people who graduate from the Yali programs, like young entrepreneurs or female leaders, right? they go and they get proper training, they get proper preparation, and they're ready to go into the bigger market. And we want to see our graduates succeed, right? So it doesn't mean they are less competitive, less fit in the market, not at all. So we don't want them to lose the spirit of winning, right? And that organization clearly said, we want to have this winning spirit, right? We want them to achieve stretching, ambitious goals, right? We don't want them to neglect their customers. So being less market culture doesn't mean it doesn't mean we are neglecting any of these points. What it means, right? We give some also decision making to people who can make, for example. We also we don't want to over focus on the results at any cost. Means does the end justify a means or not? So in this case, they wanted to say means also matters. It's not just the results, no matter what, but we also want to achieve results in an enjoyable manner. We want people to have fun while working on towards their results, right? So we want to have less competitive within, might be more collaborative, more enjoyable, right? So we also want to keep motivating people, right? So I thought this is a good example just to share. And then so I guess some of these messages I shared in the presentation, so you should be able to review and see what can be done. So in case you find it interesting and you would like to think about YALI culture, and so the next step would be, and this is the typical framework, right? This is a framework. How would you like, if you would like to change, to ameliorate a bit your culture, to transform a bit differently? This is key steps. This is when I would be running workshops as organization, we would try to follow these steps. So first we need to map where we are, and we did it, right? It's only 15 people. I understand it's not like YALI is a big organization. You may extend, you have questionnaire, you can run in your offices and see what people think. It's always fun to see what people think about your office culture, what people think about big YALI organization culture. Then it would be, and this takes a lot of time, but it's worth it to get together and think what we would like to have, what culture we would like to build. We need to reach consensus. Of course, we can be flexible. Of course, we can make changes if needed, but so far we need to reach consensus on the design culture and try to stick it. Now we need to be one voice when we will be working on this team. It shouldn't be conflicting messages from the leaders. Once we reach the consensus, we need to deliver this one voice message to the team. And then we need to remember, once we have this, we need to work on very specific objectives. What changes has to be made? Should we eliminate some paperwork? Should we maybe promote some people? Should we make some acknowledgement? Should we maybe, if we want to build more adhocracy, maybe we need to have more brainstorming. Maybe we should value certain type of, innovative environment. Maybe, I don't know, some companies, they invest into furniture. When you come into the offices, you look and it's very crazy what they do. In Disney, someone would have, if you work on animation movie about Moana, for example, what you would do, there would be everything decorated. They would be sitting not on a chair, but it's like a wooden boat or something. So this is how would we change? What should be changed in the environment, right? And then storytelling. Remember, storytelling is a key part about delivery. You need to deliver. You need to share the stories. You need to share the stories, illustrative stories, what maybe other companies, other organizations did. Illustrative stories, how you did. Share your stories. It's really influential when you share your experience and your story and how it ended. You start building the culture, right? Then you build strategic action plan and then implementation. Again, so working on organizational culture is a leadership activity. Like I started, is a top concern for the leaders. Why? Because organizations you can trust, you can rely on the people working with you, and then you become effective. You achieve more within the same time frame. That's why organizational culture is important. And also it's more enjoyable. With the right organizational culture, job satisfaction is much higher. people are not burning out. They come to work motivated, they come inspired, they want to come to work. Remember, at home, you want to come to work, at work, you want to go back home. You enjoy every part of your life, you're well-rounded individuals. Now, when I look at the time, my initial idea, and I didn't know how much it was like planning, how much time we would spend, right, on this. So my idea was to have group discussion, and we can do this, right? And so let me to update a bit. So I would start how this discussion will not achieve everything, and it would be unrealistic to make the whole, but let me share the way I would run the. So typically when I would be helping organizations to work and build and maybe to change and complement their organizational cultures, it would be like the following steps. And this is what I would encourage you to think about when you have yearly meetings and together at your office level. So what is our existing organizational culture among Yale's offices, right? And it's one of the questions. How would we like to build it? And I would like to open it later once I finish. Would you like to build an overarching culture across 4 Yale offices and new offices? Or would you like to and it seems make sense, right? Like we are still one, and I understand you may be running it like more or less independently, but would it make sense to build Yale culture? And if it's one overarching culture, it would be easier for you guys to work together between offices, right? Because you have some common values, common beliefs, assumptions, right? Practices, behaviors. You can rotate people and they would be having the same mindset. If you have more or less similar culture across offices, it's easier to work together among offices. It's easier to staff people on cross office projects, right? Or so like what's our existing? What would you like to proceed with this, right? What challenges does our current organizational culture pose? For example, if it's market, if it's predominantly market and hierarchy, is it what we would like to have? And it should be an open discussion. And maybe we'll say yes. Or maybe you'll say like, yes, it works, but to a certain extent. Now we need to make it maybe a bit more collaborative. Maybe we need to bring some elements of adhocracy, right? I'm just hypothesizing, but just an example, right, to think about. And then we would like to reach consensus. What organizational culture would we like to create, right? So this is my idea, was to form relevant groups, but I think it's better if we discuss this as a team together. But if you need my help, or you can do it on your own, you can always reach out to me. I'll be happy to work with you if needed, or you can do it on your own. It's also once you split, and typically you split into smaller groups, and you would discuss together, right? So what do you think? How would we move forward? What was Yale's way forward? And then you would present smaller team discussions to a bigger whole team meeting, and then you'll start developing. So this is kind of partially is brainstorming, right? You're thinking, you're trying to map, you're thinking of what works, what doesn't work, and how should we tackle these issues, and what we would like to get, and then we can do it in groups, and then we can discuss together. So so let me open this, like, do you see some, like, how would you like to proceed with organizational culture? What would be your ideas? Would you like to maybe schedule some kind of a meeting across all offices, get together? Would you like to run it on your local level? And do you see something you think might be improved? And also, like, for example, when you start developing a desired organizational culture, in case you think you would like to improve it, you might think about what to highlight in this work, right? You can highlight teamwork, or maybe you can have several goals to highlight. You can highlight, for example, accountability. For example, you can highlight transparency, for example. So you can integrity. So they're like, so the direction what you mentioned will take you maybe to a bit different direction. And then they're like, and you will be building on this. But I would like to open up to everyone. What do you think, guys? How would you proceed forward with that? So Georgie, what's your opinion? How would you, do you think, would it make sense to get together and discuss it, or?
Yes, and I just put something on chat. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity next week as Ayali RLC East Africa, where we will have a retreat. It's a pause and reflect retreat. You know, looking at the implementation of the deliverables and milestones in our contract. Yeah, but I'm thinking we can take a bit of time to take the assessment first, because I think it's you appreciate the 360 degrees of it when you take the assessment first, and then now we have this conversation around you know the culture or what type of organization you know we are, and actually pivot based on the ideas from colleagues on you know how they should perceive it, you know, because understanding to me is really, really important. Yeah, because it has been made clear here that you see you are either market or a democracy, you know, depending on you know where you're coming from or where you sit in the organization. So you know, you can also talk about hierarchical depending on where you sit again. Yeah, so I think that's what I would suggest. And then I don't know whether we would have an opportunity, but if we have, I see the Learning Summit, and we are hosting the Learning Summit this year. Yeah, so all the RLCs will come to Nairobi, God willing, and you know that we can also have a session around discussing these results from the different RLCs. Thank you, and over.
Yeah, no, thank you, Georgia, for sharing that. Rich, what about you? What do you think about this? Do you think, George, does it make sense to get together at the meeting in Nairobi, for example, or? Rich or? So, Monthar, would you like to share? What do you think? Is it something you find important to discuss and address, and the way you would do that? Karen, what do you think about that?
I think that the current results are so diverse that perhaps the approach that one should take is to first discuss it at individual RLC level. And then as an RLC within the broader perspective decide this is how we would like to see us being positioned in the broader picture, and reach consensus at that level before we move over to a YALI Africa level. That is the approach that I would suggest at this stage.
Okay. And at the RLC level, how would you do that?
I think this session was quite informative to me personally, you know, because I do also think that it relates to management style to a certain extent, and also what we would like to see to be achieved. So, or how we experience it. So perhaps, we have different perspectives on how things should be done, and not necessarily how the organizational culture is at the moment. And I think that's, my perception is different from someone else's. So I think the best would be to take the staff members of our RLC through an exercise like this. So that, because it was an eye opener to me, and I think if we are open to learn about ourselves, we will be able to also position ourselves and revise some perceptions that needs to be revised to be able to form a team to be able to move forward. So I think the approach would be get everyone together, let them do this. This was really, it was enlightening to me, and I really enjoyed this session. And then from there, see what you have around your table, and then decide how you're going to proceed from there. But obviously, as one might need obviously professional input from yourself, perhaps, so and guidance. I don't think personally that any of us around, in the team are skilled in that art of saying that this is what you have in your basket, and this is what you need to address going forward. So I think it should be a guided process.
Yeah, thank you for that well thought reflections on this, and I'm glad you found it useful and informative and enlightening, like you mentioned. And I would be happy if you do it like at the RSC level, this kind of workshop, just to discuss it and see like where we are and what we would like to do and it's fun. And I find working organizational culture is fun, right? Like this is something what inspires, something like what makes organizations effective, and it's always cool. Harry, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to throw in my 2 cents with. I agree with Karen in the sense that if it has to start at the RLC level for us to get a sense of our perceptions of where we are, and then we can then reach some consensus in terms of where we want to be. What would be interesting would be to compare that across the 4 RLCs, both scenarios where each of us are and where we want to be, or whether there's some commonality in terms of where we all 4 want to be in terms of organizational culture. And then we can use that as a starting point to kind of have a Pan-African YALI culture.
Yeah. The one thing, and thank you, Harry, for sharing. Yeah, really, well appreciated. So one thing to consider, if you start discussing organizational culture at the RSC level, it can be very useful and insightful. The only like potential concern would be that you would come up with something at your local level a bit different from another office. And then it would be harder to, to reconcile, because the moment you agree on something at your local level, you start thinking of it as your own baby, and it's cool, you like it, and it will be harder to unify it. So
I might have a different view on that.
Please.
The way you started it, you took us to a scenario where you said, what are the shared values? What are the effective means of communication? And if at different RLC, we can have that approach, it's very highly that there will be shared values among us based on the best practices. I think what the point that we need to underline is the point that Harry has just thrown in, that of a Pan-African YALI. If we adopt such an approach, we are likely to converge in our thinking. Remember, we have had this same training, and we now actually the other thing that makes the discussion when we start engaging us into the discussions, the other reason why people are hesitant is that this was actually an eye-opener for all of us. For most of us, we have studied organizational development, but we have brought it on the other level, on a practical level. And we even took it down into the RLC. It is now thought-provoking for us. What needs to happen now is, what is this Pan-African approach that we need to adopt? What are the barriers that could pose a challenge to us? So I think if you can have that Pan-African approach and study to where we started, when we started with this lesson, those effective communications and all those values that we have highlighted, it's likely that we might even succeed without experiencing much challenges, maybe that you might have thought.
Yeah. So no, totally. Yeah, it makes sense to start. Maybe if you think it's better at the local level and discuss, because you know better, and it's maybe easier to arrange. And then when you get to Pan-African YALI level, it's important because it can go a different way, but it's important we stay open. So what you agree and what you come, what kind of consensus you reach, you always need to keep at the back of your mind that now we need to stay open and discuss it with other offices. And this way, you can develop, you know, like the whole YALI, like the view, the whole YALI perspective and whole YALI culture, right? So that would be amazing. I also saw Binta could wrote that, yes, it's a good idea, opportunity to implement it after Learning Summit. So this is like another point to think about. So it's like, it's ideas and we need to start thinking. So maybe we don't have to decide right away, but once when you have your coffee, to keep thinking about this, when you drive home, when we think about something, we usually come up with good results. The more time we spend on something, like brain power results. So let's keep thinking, and if you're ready to arrange, it would be amazing. And George also offered, it can be a journal article can arise out of this, comparing the 4 RLCs, right? So comparing all the RLCs. If you would like to invite me to write an article, I always like writing, so please count on me. Or if you can do it on your own, it's also fun. I think we are reaching the end of our today's session. I think I need to wrap up, if I'm not mistaken. Please don't forget, on Thursday, the first session will be about program sustainability, how to make all the work that you did together with USAID or with other grant donors, how to make it sustainable, how to make your local offices continue and be successful. Let's talk about this on Thursday. Thank you everyone for joining. I really enjoyed our session. Thank you for speaking, reflecting. I think we learn a lot, and I also learned from you and to know. Thank you and have a good day.
Sergey, thank you so much for being here today. It was a fascinating and engaging session, and we will look forward to seeing you again on Thursday. And
Thank you.
For everyone else, we will be back here, same time, same place tomorrow, and we'll be talking about enhancing team creativity and innovation and pursuing and managing grant funds. And Charlie will send out a short evaluation from today that we would love to have back. And we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.